The storm outside had been building for hours, rattling the windows with an anxious energy, as if the sky itself wanted to say something it couldn't. A single candle flickered on the desk, the weak flame fighting to push back the shadows that seemed thicker than they should be. In its trembling light lay an envelope, plain unmarked, no return address, only my name written in ink so deep and deliberate it seemed burned into the paper. I stared at it for too long, my fingers hovering above its edge, my pulse outpacing the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally I tore it open. The paper inside was thick, the kind of quality you didn't see anymore. One sentence was written across it, scented perfectly, as though someone had measured each space. "The forgotten cell is waiting for you." The words felt heavier than they should. The air in the room shifted, carrying with it a faint scent, metallic, cold, and oddly familiar. Somewhere in the distance I thought I heard the faintest whisper. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, but the wind doesn't shape words. I folded the letter back into its envelope, but the weight of it didn't lessen. My fingers were shaking, not from fear exactly, but from the sense that I had just stepped into something I couldn't step out of. I looked around my small apartment. Everything seemed ordinary, the bookshelf against the wall, the half-finished mug of tea on the table. Yet somehow, the ordinary didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. I sat back in my chair and tried to think. Who would send something like this, and why me? My first instinct was to dismiss it as some elaborate prank, but the longer I sat there, the less that explanation made sense. The penmanship was too deliberate, the message too precise, and the strange metallic scent in the air that was no accident. My phone was on the desk just inches away. I thought about calling someone, but who? What would I say? "Hi, I just got a letter from nowhere telling me something's waiting for me." That would go over well. My friends already thought I read too many crime novels. The candlelight swayed, pulling my attention toward the shadows in the corner of the room. For the briefest moment, I thought I saw movement, something shifting just beyond the edge of light. My breath caught, but when I turned my head fully, there was nothing there. Still, the shadows felt thicker. I pushed the chair back and stood. The apartment was silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. I walked slowly to the window and looked out into the rain-slicked street. No cars, no pedestrians, just the reflection of the street lamp in the puddles below. My eyes drifted back to the envelope on the desk. I don't know why I did it, but I picked it up again. This time, I held it close to my face. The scent was stronger, like old iron and something else I couldn't name. The paper felt faintly warm in my hand. That was when I noticed something I had missed before. In the lower right corner of the page, just barely visible in the candlelight, there was a faint watermark. It was in the shape of a key, but the bow of the key was formed by a circle of tiny, unreadable letters. I angled the paper toward the light, trying to make them out, but the candle flickered violently as if protesting the attempt. The whisper came again. This time I was certain it wasn't the wind. It was a voice, low, drawn out, coming from somewhere behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. The shadows clung to the corners like thick smoke. My phone lit up on the desk. A notification. No name, no number, just a single text. "You've already been seen." The screen dimmed again, plunging the room back into candlelight. I stood, frozen, unsure whether to be afraid or to chase whatever this was to its end. My instinct said to burn the letter, delete the text, forget any of it ever happened. But curiosity, dangerous, insistent, was louder. I pulled my coat from the back with the chair and slipped it on. The letter went into the inside pocket, pressing against my chest like a second heartbeat. The air outside was colder than it should have been for this time of year, heavy with the scent of wet asphalt. I locked the door behind me. The street was empty. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, as though there were walls on either side of me where there were none. I reached the corner and hesitated. I had no destination, no map, no idea where I was supposed to go, but I had the letter, and the letter felt like it was leading me. Another text came through. This one contained nothing but an address. It was only 6 blocks away. I stared at it until the cold began to seep through my coat. Then I started walking. The buildings grew older the farther I went. Their brick facades cracked and darkened with years of neglect. Streetlights here flickered uncertainly, and in some spots, didn't work at all. I passed a boarded-up shopfront, its windows covered with yellowed newspapers from a decade ago. By the time I reached the address, the rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and still. It was an alleyway, narrow and uninviting. A single rusted door sat halfway down, with no sign, no number, no indication that it had been used recently. The door was unlocked. It opened with a sound like something exhaling after a long sleep. Inside was darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the dim light from the alley. I stepped in, my hand on the wall to guide me. The scent inside was the same as the letter: iron, dust, and something faintly electric. My eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a long, narrow corridor lined with metal doors. Each had a small barred window near the top. They were all closed. Somewhere deeper inside, a sound echoed, slow, deliberate footsteps. Not mine. And then, from the darkness ahead, a voice, calm, patient, and impossibly close, said my name. The voice wrapped around me like cold water, sinking deep into my chest before my mind could even react. My name spoken slowly, as if the speaker had been waiting for years to finally say it. I froze, my hand still on the wall, every muscle tense. The footsteps I'd heard a moment ago had stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than before, pressing in from all sides. "Who's there?" My voice sounded smaller than I intended, the question dissolving into the corridor like it had been swallowed. The darkness ahead shifted, not like a shadow moving, but like the air itself had thickened. I took a single step forward, my fingers grazing the cold metal of one of the barred doors. The metal was damp. My skin prickled at the sensation. It felt more like condensation from breath than water. "You're late," the voice said again, this time farther away, yet still as clear as if it were next to my ear. "I don't even know who you are," I said. The words felt absurd in the emptiness. The faint sound of metal scraping echoed down the corridor. I couldn't tell if it was behind me or ahead. My heartbeat had moved up into my throat. Another door to my left caught my attention. Unlike the others, its barred window wasn't dark. A faint, pulsing light glowed from within, slow and steady like a heartbeat. I hesitated only a second before stepping closer, my boots making almost no sound on the damp floor. I peered inside. The room beyond was small, maybe 6 feet square, with walls covered in deep scratches as if someone had tried, over and over, to claw their way out. The source of the light was a single bulb hanging from the ceiling by a frayed cord. It wasn't steady. Every time it dimmed, the scratches seemed to shift, forming faint shapes I couldn't quite decipher before the light returned. I stepped back quickly, my shoulder bumping another door across the corridor. It creaked slightly under the pressure, but didn't open. "Don't look in there," the voice said sharply, this time from behind me. I spun around. The corridor was empty, the darkness unbroken except for the dim light from the cell I'd just looked into. My breath quickened. "Where are you?" "You shouldn't be here yet," the voice replied. It was softer now, almost resigned. "They'll hear you." The word they lodged in my mind like a splinter. Before I could ask, a sound rose from deep in the corridor, low, rhythmic, like a slow drumbeat made by something enormous. With each beat, the metal of the doors rattled faintly. The glowing cell's light flickered faster, the scratches on the walls forming patterns that made my head ache to look at. I stepped back until my shoulders pressed against the cold wall behind me. The drumbeat grew louder, faster, until it wasn't a beat anymore but a pounding. The corridor seemed to contract with the sound, the air thickening, pressing in on my ribs. "Run," the voice whispered. I didn't hesitate this time. I turned and bolted down the corridor, my hands skimming the walls to keep my balance. The pounding behind me grew chaotic, joined by other sounds: metal slamming, chains dragging, doors shaking violently in their frames. The corridor twisted sharply to the left. I took the turn without slowing, but the floor here was slick, and my boots slid out from under me. I hit the ground hard, the impact jarring my shoulder. The pounding was closer now. I scrambled to my feet, my eyes catching on a door ahead different from the rest. It was wood, not metal, and it stood slightly ajar. A faint light spilled out, warmer than the cold glow of the cell before. I pushed through it and slammed it shut behind me. The noise outside cut off instantly, replaced by a deep, unnatural silence. The room I had entered was larger than I expected. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes, jars, and stacks of yellowed paper. In the center stood a table covered with photographs. I moved closer, my breath slowing as I took them in. Each photo showed a different person: men, women, even children, all looking directly at the camera with the same blank, distant expression. The backgrounds varied: a street corner, a living room, a forest. But in each, somewhere in the frame, there was the same faint symbol I'd seen on the letter's watermark, a key with letters circling its bow. Some photos had dates written on the back in neat, deliberate handwriting. Others had only numbers. "You're not supposed to touch those," said the voice again, this time from the far corner of the room. I turned slowly. A figure stood there, half in shadow, tall, thin, wearing a long coat that seemed to drink in the light. His face was partially obscured, but what I could see was pale, almost colorless, with sharp, angular features. "Who are you?" I asked. "That's not important yet," he said, stepping closer. "What matters is that you've been chosen for what?" "To find it," he said simply. The way he said it made my stomach knot. "Find what?" He looked at the table of photographs. The cell that doesn't belong." I shook my head. "I don't understand any of this. What is this place? Why me?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Because you've already seen the door." I thought back to the alley, the rusted door, the faint metallic scent. My chest tightened. "That was just a building. It's nothing." "You still think you're outside," he said. "You're not." A chill crawled up my spine. "What do you mean?" He glanced toward the wooden door I had come through. "Listen carefully. There are rules here. Don't speak to anyone through the bars. Don't follow the light if it flickers more than twice. And never, under any circumstances, open a door if you hear your own voice on the other side." The heaviness in his tone made my skin prickle. Before I could respond, the pounding from the corridor began again, faint at first, then rapidly approaching. The man's head snapped toward the sound. "They're early," he muttered. He moved quickly, to one of the shelves, pulling down a small box. Inside was a key in black, and strangely cold even from where I stood. He pressed it into my hand. "You'll need this, but only once." The pounding was right outside the wooden door now. The hinges shuddered. The man stepped back into the shadows. The door burst open before I could ask another question. The corridor beyond was empty, but the pounding continued. Now, from everywhere at once, above, below, inside the walls, I ran the shelves, the photographs. The man, they vanished the moment I crossed the threshold, replaced by endless darkness. My footsteps echoed back at me, sounding just slightly out of sync, as if someone or something was running beside me. Somewhere ahead, a faint light appeared, flickering once, twice. I stopped. The corridor seemed to tilt beneath my feet as the light ahead flickered a third time. The man's warning slammed into my memory. "Ever under any circumstances, follow the light if it flickers more than twice." My breath caught. The air here was wrong, thick, damp, and humming faintly, like there was an electrical current running just under the surface of reality. I took one slow step back. The light pulsed again, but now it wasn't coming from a single source. It seemed to bleed out from the walls themselves, seeping through cracks that hadn't been there a moment ago. A soft tapping began behind me, not footsteps too delicate. It was the sound of fingernails on glass. I turned my head just enough to glance back, and froze. The corridor I had come through was gone, replaced by a sheer wall of black glass stretching from floor to ceiling. My own reflection stared back at me, but it was wrong. Her eyes were slightly too wide, her mouth curved into the faintest smile. She raised her hand and tapped again. The sound echoed in my skull. I stepped back toward the flickering light without meaning to, my attention locked on that other version of me. Her smile widened, exposing teeth that didn't belong in a human mouth, too many, too sharp, glinting in the dim glow. "Emma," she said, but her lips didn't move. The voice came from inside the glass, vibrating through my bones. I stumbled back and the flickering light swelled, as if sensing my hesitation. It cast long, twisted shadows that didn't match my movements. The glass behind me cracked, just once, like a single hairline fracture spidering across its surface. A sound leaked through, a whisper, fast and layered. Too many voices speaking at once for me to catch the words. I turned and ran toward the light. The corridor narrowed quickly, the ceiling lowering until I had to hunch. The flickering grew erratic, flashing so brightly that each burst left ghostly after images swimming in my vision. When I reached the source, I stopped. It wasn't a bulb or torch. It was a keyhole. Light poured through it in slow, throbbing waves, each pulse accompanied by a faint metallic scraping from the other side. The door was old, its surface swollen with damp, the wood splintered and blackened around the edges. My hand hovered over the handle. "Don't," came the man's voice, close enough that I could feel his breath on my ear. I spun around. The corridor was empty. The scraping on the other side of the door quickened, becoming frantic, desperate. The light through the keyhole flared, momentarily blinding me. When my vision cleared, I saw something in the glow, a shadow moving, pacing, stopping right in front of the keyhole. It whispered my name. The whisper curled around my skull like smoke, thin and cold. My name shouldn't sound like that, elongated, stretched, as though it had to be forced through something too narrow to contain it. I stepped back from the keyhole, pulse pounding. The shadow behind the door didn't move. It stayed there perfectly, still, as though listening. Then, without warning, the handle twitched. I froze. It didn't turn all the way, just enough to make the wood groan in protest. The scraping from before shifted into a slow, deliberate dragging sound like metal on stone circling the room beyond. The keyhole pulsed again, spilling light that didn't behave like light. It was too heavy, bending around the edges of my vision, pushing at the inside of my skull. My knees weakened and then, soft as the door breathed. The wood swelled inward as though something on the other side had leaned against it. I took another step back, my shoulder hitting the damp wall. My fingers brushed against something slick. I pulled my hand away, but the dark smear on my skin shimmered faintly under the flicker. The whisper came again, closer this time, not from behind the door, from above. I tilted my head, and in that fractured second, I saw it. A thin, pale hand was pressed flat against the ceiling directly over me, its fingers splayed impossibly wide. Each fingertip tapered into a point, not nails, but bone. The skin was translucent, veins branching like roots just beneath the surface. It slid forward without making a sound, vanishing into a seam where the ceiling met the wall. The door handle rattled again, harder now, the wood cracking under the strain. Something wanted out. Something wanted out. A low hum began to rise, so deep I felt it more than heard it. It vibrated through the walls, through my teeth, until my vision shook. I pressed my palms to my ears, but it didn't stop. It was inside me now. The light through the keyhole dimmed, then flared, revealing an eye dot. It was huge, pressed so close that the lashes scraped against the edges of the hole. The iris was a dull, clouded gray, shot through with veins that pulsed faintly. It didn't blink. And then, the eye rolled upward, disappearing from view. Silence. A click echoed inside the lock. I knew the door was about to open. The final click was quieter than I expected, almost polite. Then the door began to open, not with a creak, but with a sound like wet fabric being pulled apart. A thin mist rolled out, cold enough to sting my eyes. The air inside the room had weight, pressing against me, carrying the smell of iron and rain-soaked earth. A shape emerged, stooped, wrapped in something that wasn't cloth but layers of shadow folding over themselves. Its head nearly brushed the ceiling, though it didn't appear solid enough to touch. Every time I blinked, its form shifted, rearranging into something less human that stepped over the threshold without making a sound. Though the floor beneath it groaned like something alive, my instincts screamed to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The thing stopped a foot away from me. The mist swirled around its face, revealing the barest hint of features, two pale hollows where eyes should be, and a mouth that didn't open so much as stretch. When it spoke, I realized the whispers I'd been hearing all along weren't coming from its mouth. They were leaking out from somewhere much deeper. "Emma," it said, my name dripping into the air like oil. "You've been so patient." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My tongue felt nailed to the roof of my mouth. Its head tilted, as if listening to something only it could hear. Then it reached into the folds of its shadow and pulled something out, a letter. My letter. The same one that had started all of this. It held it up to me, and I saw that the paper had changed. The handwriting was the same, but the ink now shimmered, like the keyhole's light, bending reality around it. "For you," it whispered, "and for what comes next." The letter fluttered from its grip, landing at my feet. Before I could pick it up, the thing leaned forward, so close I could see the faint pulse of veins beneath its translucent skin. "You'll open it," it said, "when it's time." Then, without another word, it stepped back into the open door. Mist swallowed it, and the wood slammed shut with a finality that shook the walls. I stared at the letter on the floor. My hands trembled as I reached for it, only to find it was blank, and from somewhere inside the room, behind the locked door, the whisper came again. Not my name this time, just two words: "You're next." For more untold truths, keep watching The Forgotten Cell. *#